I wasn't supposed to be home until next week. My job as a commercial electrician had me working out of state for a 3-week contract in Denver. But the site wrapped early, so I caught a red-eye back to Arizona, dreaming of sleeping in my own bed and watering the plants that had probably given up on me by now. I pulled up to my house at noon, sun blazing like a blowtorch, and immediately something felt off. There were cars parked along the curb, luxury sedans, a couple of men in polos holding clipboards, and even a woman in a sun hat waving people toward my front yard like she was hosting a garden party. That's when I saw the sign. Auction today, 2 p.m. sharp. Property foreclosure. I froze. My name is Devin Fairbanks. I own this house, outright. Paid it off 2 years ago after a decade of blood, sweat, and side hustles. There's no bank involved, no mortgage, no foreclosure, and yet there it was, my house being prepped for a live auction like I was some squatter who'd skipped town. I threw open the gate. What the hell is going on? A few heads turned, but one in particular snapped around like a vulture spotting meat. Nancy Sheffield, president of the Wisteria Bluffs HOA. Mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, sunglasses that probably cost more than my power tools, and a clipboard clutched like it was her badge of authority. "Oh, Mr. Fairbanks," she said, voice dripping with fake concern. "We didn't expect you back so soon." "I live here," I snapped. "Why is there a sign saying my house is being auctioned?" Nancy blinked, then gestured vaguely toward her clipboard. "Well, Devin, we sent multiple notices. You've had extensive code violations, unpaid fines, and we followed proper procedure under the HOA charter. The board approved the foreclosure last month." I stared at her like she'd grown a third eye. "I've been gone for 3 weeks. No notices, no violations. What are you even talking about?" "Oh, please," she huffed. "The grass was over 6 inches tall. You left your trash bin out for 3 days, and your mailbox flag was left up for a week. We documented everything. And of course, there were the noise complaints." "What noise complaints?" I asked. "Well," she said, flipping through her papers, "someone claimed to hear construction noises at night. It was very disruptive." I looked her dead in the eye. I was in another state. Nancy's carefully painted smile faltered. "That's not my concern," the board voted. "It's all perfectly legal. You can't auction off someone's house because of a trash bin and tall grass," she sniffed. "You'd be surprised what our bylaws allow." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about grass, it was a power play. Nancy had been gunning for me ever since I refused to let her use my driveway for her daughter's wedding photos last year. "You forged this, didn't you?" I said, stepping closer. "You never sent those notices. You never even voted. You just wanted me gone." Nancy's jaw tightened. "I don't have to stand here and be accused of, you're damn right you don't," I cut in. "Because you're done here." I turned and started snapping photos of everything, the sign, the crowd, the papers in her hand. One of the clipboard guys backed away like he'd just realized he was standing in a crime scene. Nancy's voice rose. "You can't just cancel an HOA auction. It's not your house to sell, Nancy." I locked eyes with her. "But it will be your face all over the news if you don't pack this circus up right now." Nancy's lips parted like she meant to bark something back, but the words caught in her throat when I started recording her with my phone. Her whole crew froze. The clipboard men suddenly discovered intense interest in their shoelaces. The woman in the sun hat made a quiet exit, pretending to answer an urgent call as she ducked between 2 parked cars. I didn't stop recording. "State your name and position." She stiffened. "Nancy Sheffield, president of the Wisteria Bluffs Homeowners Association. And are you currently attempting to auction off the property located at 42 Sycamore Lane?" Her jaw clenched. "Yes, per the regulations outlined in the community charter. Do you have a court order permitting this action?" She blinked. "This is an internal enforcement matter. We operate under civil codes." I lowered the phone slightly. "So that's a no." Nancy's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I turned to the man in the navy blazer standing by a fold-out table stacked with bid sheets and glossy pamphlets showing photos of my living room. "Who are you with?" he swallowed. "Sunrise Property Recovery. We just handle asset liquidation for HOAs." "We were told this property was cleared." "Did you verify that with the county?" I asked. He hesitated. "We were provided documentation by the board." Which board? I turned the phone toward him. Name the board members. He looked at Nancy. She looked like she was chewing glass. I stopped filming and called the sheriff's department. Nancy's voice came back quick and sharp. That's completely unnecessary. No, I said. It's exactly what this calls for. While I waited for the deputy to arrive, I walked over to my front door. The lock had been drilled out. A new key box had been installed with a tag from a local property management firm. I took out my phone again and dialed the company. A receptionist answered, and I asked for the property manager listed on the tag. A man named Brent came on the line, and I explained the situation. His tone shifted instantly. I was told the house was seized under court order, he said. We were contracted to manage the transition. Who hired you? The HOA board. A woman named Hang on Nancy Sheffield. I thanked him and hung up just as a sheriff's cruiser pulled in. Deputy Ramirez stepped out and adjusted his sunglasses, taking in the crowd with a raised brow. I walked up to him. Someone tried to steal my house. Ramirez's expression didn't change, but he motioned for me to explain while he took notes. I kept it short and factual, no speculation, just what I'd observed, what I'd recorded, and what I could prove. Nancy tried to insert herself halfway through. Officer, this is a civil enforcement action. He held up a hand without looking at her. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to wait over there. She bristled but stepped back. Ramirez had me walk him through the damage to the door, the auction materials, and the new lockbox. He asked if I had documents proving ownership. I pulled out my phone and showed him the deed, tax records, and utility bills, all with my name and address. He nodded. Looks solid. You live here. 10 years, I said. Never missed a payment. House is paid off. He radioed for a supervisor. While we waited, I noticed Nancy pacing near the edge of the lawn, phone pressed to her ear, whispering furiously. Her face had gone pale beneath the makeup. Ramirez's supervisor, Sergeant Klein, arrived within 15 minutes. Ramirez briefed him, and they both approached Nancy together. Ma'am, Klein said, we're going to need to see your authorization for this auction. She handed over a folder, her hands trembling. He flipped through it, frowning deeper with each page. These signatures, are these the full board? Yes, she said. They're all official. Because I just called the county recorder's office, he replied. Only 2 board members are registered. The other 3 names don't match any records. Nancy's mouth opened, then closed. Klein continued. And this notice of lien, it's missing a docket number. There's no stamp from the civil court. She tried to recover. We followed the expedited process. There is no expedited process for foreclosing on a primary residence without court review, he said flatly. He turned to Ramirez. Go ahead and detain her. We're going to need to take this to the precinct. Nancy's hands shot up. You can't arrest me, I'm an HOA officer. You're impersonating legal authority and attempting real estate fraud, Klein said. That's a felony. Ramirez cuffed her gently, guiding her to the cruiser. The rest of the auction crew scattered like cockroaches. I watched them go, heart pounding but steady. The kind of calm that only comes after a hurricane passes. Klein came back over. We'll need you to come down to the station later to give a full statement, and I'd recommend changing your locks. Whoever drilled it probably still has a copy of the new ones. I nodded. I'll handle it. As the cruiser pulled away, a few of my neighbors emerged from their homes. I hadn't realized how many people were watching behind blinds and curtains. An older couple from across the street walked over. I'd only spoken to them a few times, mostly about trash pickup and neighborhood watch stuff. The woman, Joyce, looked shaken. Devin, I'm so sorry. We had no idea she was doing this. She tell anyone she had permission. Joyce glanced at her husband. She said the board had taken possession because you'd abandoned the property, that you'd left town for good. I stared at her. And you believed her, the husband, Dale, shook his head. We didn't want to. But she told everyone you'd signed it over to the HOA in exchange for back dues. I don't owe dues, I said. Joyce looked like she might cry. She talked about you like you were some deadbeat, said we'd be getting a nicer class of buyer soon. I sighed and rubbed my temple. Did she ever show proof? Just waved around some papers, never let anyone see them up close. I nodded. Thanks for telling me. As they walked away, I went inside for the first time in nearly a month. The air was stale from the AC being off. I flicked on the lights and did a sweep. Nothing looked stolen, but I noticed a few drawers were open. Someone had rifled through my desk. My file cabinet had been broken into. Even my safe had fresh scratches around the dial. I documented everything with photos. Then I called my friend Liana, a real estate attorney, and asked if she could come by. She showed up an hour later, briefcase in hand, wearing flats and a no-nonsense expression. I handed her the documents I'd taken from Nancy's clipboard, and she scanned them silently. "This is amateur hour," she said. "Forged signatures, fake citations, no judicial process. If she submitted any of this to a financial institution or property firm, she committed wire fraud too." "She did," I said. "Sunrise Property Recovery." Liana's eyebrows rose. "That's a real company. I've worked with them before. If they acted on this, they're going to have a legal mess on their hands." "She played them," I said. "Same way she played everyone else," Liana nodded. "We're filing tomorrow. Restraining order, civil suit, and criminal complaint. You don't just get to fabricate a foreclosure and walk away." I looked around my house. The walls were still mine. The photos, the tools, the worn leather recliner I'd hauled from my first apartment, all still here. But now every corner felt like it had been violated. "Can you also get her removed from the board?" I asked. Liana smiled faintly. "By the time I'm done, she'll be lucky if she can serve on a PTA." I sat down at my kitchen table, phone buzzing with texts from neighbors who'd heard what happened. Some offered help, others asked questions. A couple apologized for believing Nancy's story. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the floor. My hands were still shaking slightly, but not from fear, from adrenaline. From the knowledge that this wasn't over. Nancy had tried to erase me from my own home. Now I was going to erase her from the entire neighborhood. By sunrise the next morning, I was at the county records office with Liana. She'd already prepped the paperwork and made sure everything was filed under emergency status. There were 2 deputies stationed at the door when we arrived, and word had clearly gotten around. A clerk recognized my name and waved us ahead of the small crowd waiting in the lobby. "We've flagged your parcel file," the clerk said, pulling it up on the screen. "Someone tried to record a change of ownership last week, but the signature on the quitclaim deed didn't match your previous filings, and the notary stamp was expired." Liana leaned forward. "Do you still have the original submission?" The clerk nodded and printed the document. Liana flipped through it, pointing to the notary seal. "That's a dead notary. License expired 3 years ago. This alone makes the filing invalid." "Want me to mark it as fraud?" the clerk asked. Liana didn't hesitate. "Yes, and attach my card to the record." As we left, Liana turned to me. "This wasn't just a power grab. Someone committed a felony to move this along. That's prison time." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My hands were clenched tight enough to leave marks in my palms. It was one thing to be lied about. It was another to have your name forged onto a legal document and your property nearly stolen out from under you. We made our next stop at the precinct. Sergeant Klein had already opened a case file, and he greeted us with a nod as we walked into the interview room. "Good timing," he said. "We got a statement from one of the auction company reps this morning. He admitted Nancy told him you were a non-responsive owner and that the HOA had assumed control of the property after repeated citations and a lien. She fabricated the entire thing," Liana said. "And she used forged documents to make it look legitimate," Klein nodded. "We're coordinating with the county investigator. If your lawyer's right about that notary stamp, that bumps this up to criminal fraud." "What about the rest of the board?" I asked. "We're bringing them in today." We already confirmed 2 members had no knowledge of the auction. The third one we called, Klein glanced at his notes, a guy named Rick Carver. He's been unreachable since yesterday. "He's the treasurer," I said. "I've only seen him at meetings once or twice. His name's on the fake vote sheet," Klein said, "and he's got a history. 2 years ago, he was sued by a different HOA for misappropriation of funds, settled out of court." Liana's eyebrows lifted. "Any connection between him and Nancy?" Klein nodded. "We're looking into that. But get this, Nancy moved into the neighborhood only 18 months ago. Since then, she's rewritten over 30% of the HOA charter bylaws. Pushed them through during sparsely attended emergency meetings. Liana's lips tightened. That's not illegal by itself, but if she used those revisions to create fake authority, she did, Klein said. We already pulled the original charter from the developer. None of the amendments Nancy filed were properly ratified. I let that sink in. So not only had she forged documents, but she'd been operating under rules that were never legally adopted. Every fine she issued, every warning notice, every so-called violation, they were all built on sand. I've got a locksmith coming this afternoon, I said. Can you assign someone to supervise while I'm at work? I don't want anyone trying to sneak back in. Klein nodded. We'll send a uniformed officer by every few hours. Until we nail this down, consider your property under protective watch. Liana had one more stop before we split. The Maricopa County Superior Court. She filed for an injunction against the HOA, freezing all board actions until a formal audit could be completed. There was no pushback from the judge. The evidence spoke for itself. When I got home later that evening, I found a plain white envelope taped to my front door. No postage, just my name scrawled in thick black marker. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature. Just a typed message, you should have stayed gone. This isn't over. I stood there for a moment, letting the words settle. Then I walked inside, locked the door, and called Klein. He picked up on the second ring. What did it say? I read it aloud. You touched the envelope. No, I said. I used gloves. We'll send someone to pick it up. Don't engage if you see her. Later that night, I installed a motion-activated camera above the front porch and another near the side gate. I set them to ping my phone with every movement. At 2:30 in the morning, I got an alert. I checked the feed. A figure in a hoodie ducked under the side fence and crept toward my backyard. They held something in their hand, maybe a flashlight, maybe something else. I hit record, dialed dispatch, and stayed on the line until a cruiser pulled up 10 minutes later. The figure bolted and disappeared into the wash behind the houses, but the officers caught a glimpse of their car as it sped off. A silver Lexus. The same model Nancy drove, though plates were unreadable. The next morning, I knocked on Joyce and Dale's door. I needed to know who was still siding with Nancy, if anyone. Joyce answered with a nervous smile. Devin, we saw the patrol car last night. Everything all right? Someone tried to get into the backyard. Did Nancy ever mention anything about me leaving town permanently? Like selling the house or moving out of state, Joyce bit her lip. She told people you had a job overseas, said you'd left the country and weren't coming back. Dale appeared behind her, arms crossed. She even said the HOA had power of attorney. That you'd signed it over to save on taxes. I stared at him. And no one questioned it. She made it sound official, Joyce said quickly. She had this binder with printed documents, said it was all filed with the state. Did anyone actually see the documents up close? No, Joyce admitted. She wouldn't let anyone handle them, said they were confidential. I nodded. Thanks. As I walked back across the street, I spotted 2 more neighbors watching from their porches. Word was spreading. The fake auction, the arrest, the forged documents. People were starting to ask questions. That afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Tasha who lived 3 blocks over. She was a nurse, worked nights. Said she'd gotten a violation notice 2 weeks ago for leaving her porch light on during daylight hours. The notice claimed her house was under surveillance for suspicious activity. Did you get fined? I asked. $200, she said. Paid it because I didn't want the drama. Do you still have the letter? She did. She brought it over that evening, and it was identical to the ones Nancy had issued during her fake foreclosure process. Same header, same language, same signature. Liana took one look and added it to the growing stack. By the end of the week, we had 7 more neighbors come forward. All of them had received odd or excessive violation notices. One man had been fined for excessive bird noise. Another had his backyard flagged for non-regulation patio furniture. None of it held up. All of it led back to Nancy. The final nail came when we got a subpoena for HOA financial records. The treasurer, Rick Carver, finally resurfaced only because he got picked up on a traffic stop and had an outstanding warrant in a neighboring county. When authorities searched his apartment, they found a safe containing HOA funds over $32,000 in cash. and a burner phone filled with texts between him and Nancy. They'd been planning to flip my house, launder the profit through a shell company, and disappear before anyone caught on. They would have gotten away with it if I hadn't come home early. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, the community center was packed. Not the usual 5 or 6 retirees sipping coffee this time, almost every homeowner showed up. People stood in the aisles, leaned against walls, whispering and trading stories. The interim board called the meeting to order. Klein was there in uniform, standing quietly near the back. Liana stepped up to the mic. As of this week, the HOA is under court-monitored audit. All actions taken by former board president Nancy Sheffield are being reviewed for criminal misconduct. We are collecting statements from anyone who received unjust fines or threats. And any homeowner impacted by her fraudulent policies will be eligible for compensation once restitution is ordered. A wave of hushed voices rippled through the room, then someone near the back stood up. It was Mr. Patel, who ran the local grocery store. "She fined me for letting my son park his bicycle on the porch." Someone else shouted. "She tried to ban wind chimes." Liana raised her hand. "Every abuse is being documented, but this starts with awareness, with people standing up and saying no more." I stepped forward then. Not because I wanted to speak, but because people needed to see the face of someone who'd fought back and won. "I came home early," I said, "and caught her trying to take everything I built. She used fake documents, fake votes, and fake laws to steal from this community, but none of it worked. Because the truth came out, and it's still coming out." A woman in the front row stood slowly. "I believed every word she said. I'm sorry. You weren't the only one," I said, "but what matters now is what we do next." The room was quiet for a long moment, then someone clapped, then another. And then the whole room erupted not in chaos, but in solidarity. For the first time, the HOA wasn't a symbol of fear or control. It was just neighbors, finally on the same side. Nancy had tried to bury me, but now she was the one being dug out, one lie at a time. 2 weeks after the packed HOA meeting, the air in Wisteria Bluffs felt different. For the first time in years, people were talking to each other. Not in whispers behind their hedges, but openly, on sidewalks and driveways. Liana told me that community cohesion would be one of our strongest assets in the civil case, and she was right. The more people came together, the more the cracks in Nancy's empire widened, but none of us expected what came next. It started with a county audit. Not of the HOA, but of property tax filings. A clerk flagged a discrepancy in the parcel history of 3 homes, all coincidentally owned by residents who had moved away in the past year without listing their homes publicly. No real estate agents, no for sale signs, just gone. The clerk sent it up the chain, and a county investigator followed the thread. That led to a bombshell. Nancy and Rick hadn't just tried to auction off my home. They had already succeeded in quietly transferring title on 3 other properties using forged documents, just like they tried with mine. All 3 had been sold to shell companies registered in Nevada, then flipped through quick sales to buyers out of state. The county investigator called Klein, who looped in the state attorney general's office. Within days, a task force was formed. Not just about HOA abuse anymore, this was real estate fraud on a scale that crossed state lines. Liana got a call from a deputy prosecutor requesting her cooperation and access to the files she'd already compiled. She accepted immediately. When the story broke, local news stations swarmed Wisteria Bluffs. I stayed quiet at first, letting the legal team do their work. But once the story aired complete with interviews from former homeowners who had returned to find strangers living in their old houses, I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. One of the victims, an elderly widow named Mrs. Holloway, had left town for 6 months to care for her sister in hospice. She returned to find her locks changed and a family from Colorado already living inside. Nancy had filed a false notice claiming the house had been abandoned, and Rick had forged a deed transfer. The family had no idea they'd bought a stolen home. The outrage was immediate. Suddenly, the entire HOA system was under scrutiny. State legislators began talking about reform. News anchors used phrases like systemic abuse and unregulated power. And in the middle of it all, Wisteria Bluffs became the example everyone pointed to. I was scheduled to testify before a grand jury in Phoenix. Liana prepped me carefully, making sure I stuck to verifiable facts. She told me the prosecutors were building a racketeering case, RICO charges, usually reserved for organized crime. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Everything echoed. When I took the stand, there were 13 people watching: jurors, clerks, lawyers, and a judge who barely moved. I told them about the day I came home early. About the fake auction, the forged paperwork, the drilled-out lock. I described the envelope with the typed threat and the figure caught on camera sneaking into my backyard. I gave them names, dates, scanned copies, and video clips burned to a flash drive. When I was done, the prosecutor asked only one question. "Why do you think they targeted you?" I didn't hesitate. Because I didn't play along. I didn't let them control me. They couldn't intimidate me, so they tried to erase me. 3 days later, the indictments dropped. Nancy was charged with wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and 3 counts of grand theft. Rick was hit with embezzlement, forgery, and money laundering. The state froze their assets and issued warrants for 2 other accomplices, former HOA volunteers, who'd helped forge inspection reports and eviction notices. They were arrested the following morning, pulled from a motel outside Flagstaff where they'd been hiding under fake names. The new interim board, made up of volunteers elected at the emergency meeting, immediately dissolved all fines issued in the past 2 years. They refunded what they could and started a restoration fund with donations from a local legal aid group. Dale and Joyce joined the committee, along with Tasha, who turned out to have a background in nonprofit finance. I didn't take a seat on the board. I didn't want to. But I showed up to every meeting and I made sure they knew I was watching. One afternoon, I was fixing a breaker box in the garage when I heard tires on gravel. I stepped outside and found a black SUV parked at the curb. A woman stepped out, dressed in a gray blazer. She introduced herself as Agent Marlowe with the state's Department of Financial Institutions. She handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal letter stating that I'd been officially recognized as a cooperating witness in a state-level corruption investigation. "You helped pull the thread," she said. "Most people would have just moved away. Most people don't catch someone auctioning their house mid-scam," I said. She nodded. "You'll be hearing from us again. There's a push for new legislation. Your testimony might help." After she left, I stood in the driveway a long time just watching the neighborhood. Kids rode bikes again. Lawns were overgrown in some places, but no one cared. Block parties had replaced anonymous complaints. People actually waved when they passed by. The following week, I got a call from Sunrise Property Recovery, the company Nancy had duped into helping with the auction. Their legal team wanted to meet. They'd filed a lawsuit against Nancy for fraudulent misrepresentation and were looking for additional witnesses. I told them I'd consider it, as long as they agreed to fund part of the neighborhood's restitution pool. They agreed within 24 hours. That weekend, I hosted a barbecue. First time I'd done anything like that. Tasha brought ribs. Joyce made potato salad. Dale tried to man the grill until he dropped the tongs and I took over. Halfway through the evening, a kid from down the street asked if I was the guy who beat the HOA lady. I looked around at the crowd, people laughing, talking, sharing food and stories. "No," I said. "The neighborhood did." He nodded like that made sense and ran off to chase a soccer ball. Later that night, as I sat on the porch alone, I scrolled through the court docket on my phone. Nancy's arraignment had been scheduled for Monday. The judge had denied bail. Rick's lawyer had filed a motion to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence, which meant more names would surface soon. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel heroic. But I did feel something else, something quieter, safe. It had taken months, but the house was mine again. Not just legally, but in every way that mattered. And I wasn't going anywhere, not now, not ever.